What's good? It's Woog. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. We have Kamaru Usman, 19 wins and 1 loss, defending the UFC Welterweight Championship against Colby Covington, 16 wins and 2 losses. This is a rematch between the two, and it will take place at UFC 268 on November 6th. Now, since the first time they fought, which was Kamaru Usman's first title defense after beating Tyron Woodley for the title. Tyron Woodley had a few successful title defenses to his credit, then ran into Kamaru Usman, who was surging after impressive unanimous decision wins against the likes of RDA, Rafael dos Anjos, and Damian Maia. Now, when Woodley defended the title against Usman pretty much dominated Tyron Woodley throughout every round. I mean, he was pressing him up against the cage, taking him down, kind of ground and pounding, or sort of half control against the cage and pounding. But Tyron Woodley didn't display that he had any answers for the pressure that Kamaru Usman was applying. And this was pretty surprising at the time, given the fact that Woodley was fresh off of one of his most impressive title defenses in a stoppage win over Darren Till. Well, after Kamaru Usman pretty much dominated Woodley, taking his title, he defended it against Colby Covington. And going into that fight, everybody was kind of wondering who was going to win the wrestling battle, since both of these guys have very high-end wrestling skills. But when these two finally took to the cage, it was an implicit agreement to just stand up and box for the entire fight. So Usman and Covington went 4+ rounds, just tit-for-tat boxing. I mean, they exchanged some kicks, but it was mostly a boxing affair, it was just one of those very stunning performances from both guys to witness. So it was just like, you're wondering, like, what am I watching here? Like, it defied all of the analysis that was going into the match between the two. Now, the reason for the decision for them to just duke it out, I really don't know what went into that, other than this was kind of a grudge match. So it was one of those, who's gonna concede the pocket? Who's gonna be the one to wilt, to break the other one? Well, through 4 rounds, it was anybody's guess as to who was winning the fight. Like, some people had it 2-2 even. Some people had it 3-1 Kamaru. Some people had it 3-1 Colby. And Kamaru did lace Colby, broke his jaw. Or at least we thought he broke his jaw. It turned out it actually wasn't broken, but he certainly compromised his jaw to where Colby Covington, after the 3rd round, went back to his corner and said, I broke my jaw. Well, Colby Covington then rallied back in the 4th round to probably take that round from Usman. So again, going into the 5th, it was really anybody's guess, but Usman ended up stopping Colby Covington in the final round. A sensational fight, to the point where Dana White has basically been hell-bent on making the rematch ever since. Now, since that first fight, so keep in mind, Colby Covington was the first title defense. He followed that up with a short notice opponent in Jorge Masvidal, because he was supposed to fight Gilbert Burns. Gilbert Burns tested positive for COVID, so this was like right in that 2020 summer. Gilbert Burns had to pull out of the fight, and then on short notice, like I'm talking very short notice, Jorge Masvidal, like within 7 to 10 days, agreed to take the fight, got into good enough shape where he made weight, and then took to the cage against Usman. And Masvidal didn't have his full gas tank. Usman was able to apply his pressure wrestling, mix it up with a little bit of striking, but not too much because of how dangerous a kickboxer and striker Jorge Masvidal is. Well, Kamaru Usman won that fight against Masvidal via unanimous decision, and then he defended that belt again against Gilbert Burns. So remember, they tried to make that fight with Burns the first time. They finally made it the second time. Usman and Burns were former longtime training partners, sparring buddies, all of that. So they, had a lot of intel on each other going into the fight. Now, this was shortly after Usman, just before the Masvidal fight, started working out with Trevor Whitman, who's known to be kind of a stand-up guru. He's the guy, largely behind the stand-up success, or just overall MMA success, of Rose Namajunas, Justin Gaethje, and so Usman has been improving on his striking. Now, he was improving on his striking even before hooking up with Trevor Whitman, so that needs to be acknowledged. His former training team, Duke Rufus and company, they obviously got Usman to a point where he earned a championship welterweight belt. But since linking up with Trevor Whitman, it's like his stand-up game is just kicked into an even higher gear. So when Usman fights Gilbert Burns, he gets clipped early, and I mean hurt, like dropped, to where you're watching the fight thinking, damn, is Gilbert Burns about to stop Kamaru Usman and win the title? Well, Usman recovered, made it out of the round, ended up, working behind a very sophisticated jab that just, he couldn't miss Gilbert Burns with that jab. And so he started mixing up the boxing and basically just taking control of the fight, to where Gilbert Burns was getting dropped multiple times, was kind of doing the thing where he's laying on his back and inviting Usman into the guard. Usman, sometimes he would oblige, sometimes he would kick at his legs, sometimes he would try to punch over the guard. So Usman standing up, punching over Gilbert Burns' guard. So Usman would eventually just let him back up, and eventually TKO'd Gilbert Burns in the third round. Very impressive performance. So that led to the rematch between Kamaru Usman and Jorge Masvidal, where it was pretty much, there are no excuses this time. Both guys have a full training camp, but they take to the cage. And this was very interesting because the idea was Usman's going to kind of pressure and wrestle Masvidal, make it out of the early moments where Masvidal is the most dangerous, like first and second round, and then try to drag it into the third, and then, hopefully win rounds and come out with another victory against Masvidal, who we all expected to be, vastly improved because he was able to have a full camp. But, Usman was obviously also able to fully prepare camp-wise for Masvidal, as opposed to, again, late-moment replacement where you're preparing for Burns, and then enter Masvidal. So there was, fast adjustments that had to be made by both guys in that first fight. But at least Usman was able to, fully have a camp, even though there's no doubt in my mind that Masvidal was working out a ton. That's why he was able to make weight. But in this rematch, you started to see Usman jab to the body and kind of feint like he was like going for a takedown, because Usman, like Colby Covington, which he displayed against Woodley, they both have a great high crotch takedown. And so Usman would kind of threaten. And so that threat mixed with the jabs to the body were getting Masvidal's respect early in the fight. I'm talking about in the first 20 seconds of the fight, to where it's in Masvidal's mind to some degree. So, they were boxing and they made it out of the first round. Pretty even first round, even though I would give it to Usman. He caught Masvidal cleanly a few times. Now, getting into the second round, he did the thing again, jabbing to the body, but then he started to catch Masvidal a couple times cleanly with the straight right hand. And they were commenting on the fact that it doesn't look like a fast right hand necessarily, but it's accurate, it's getting there, and it obviously has some pop to it. So he makes Masvidal smile a couple times after the connects, where Masvidal's kind of like smiling, like implicitly saying, you got me, but the smile is supposed to be kind of a sinister, I'm going to get you back for that type of thing. Well, again, a couple more feints and a couple more jabs later, he dips, comes over the top with a beautiful right hand that totally shuts Masvidal's lights out. And this was a shocking one-punch knockout that, he followed it up with a few unnecessary, but, it's very necessary in the words of Masvidal, until the ref breaks it up, hammer fist. Totally stuns and shocks the crowd and the viewing audience and the broadcast team. Keep in mind, this fight, this rematch, was in Florida, Jacksonville. And so this was a very, very pro-Masvidal crowd who's from Florida. And they were just booing Usman upon the entrance in the Bruce Buffer announcements, booing the hell out of Usman. So this crowd was just stunned at that sensational knockout win for Kamaru Usman. So by this time, Kamaru Usman now has 3 successful title defenses, and they're already kind of having the conversation. Is he, GSP, George St. Pierre, is pretty much almost unanimously recognized as the greatest welterweight of all time. So then it becomes, has Usman surpassed Woodley? Most would say yes, but, there's still a convo to be had. And then the next up, you would imagine, is Matt Hughes. So it's like, is Usman second or third all-time welterweight? That's where Usman's entering in terms of his legacy at this point. So keep in mind, 3 title defenses since defending successfully against Colby Covington, since their first fight. And in the meantime, all Colby Covington has done is beat Tyron Woodley after Woodley was on a 2-fight losing streak, losing the title to Usman and then getting dominated by Gilbert Burns, dropped multiple times in that fight. Colby Covington dominates and then stops Woodley. It was a rib injury in the 5th, but he was just pummeling Woodley by that point. The first round was competitive. The second round was a little bit more clear for Colby Covington. By the time they got into the 3rd and especially the 4th round, Woodley was looking like a beaten man. And then they enter the 5th round and he stops Woodley in the 5th after, again, the high crotch takedowns are, especially in the 4th round, Woodley was basically super discouraged by that point. And even in the stand-up, because Colby Covington took Woodley down early in the 1st round. So this is already playing into Woodley's mind, not only a threat, but the actual takedown. And Woodley has a background of a wrestler. So, you know, what's happened to Woodley in these last few fights in his UFC career in that 4-fight losing streak, it's really kind of a mystery. Some of it is age, apparently. Some of it is just being gun shy, not having the same tools, or just having some sort of a confidence issue and not pulling the trigger in that right hand, or engaging in wrestling, maybe not trusting your gas tank. But Woodley is clearly not the same Woodley that held the title for those title defenses, or even the run up to earning the title for Woodley. So all Colby Covington has done since that Usman versus Covington 1 fight was beat Tyron Woodley, who was already on a steep decline, and somehow he finds himself back in a title challenge, which, again, Dana White's been wanting this rematch for some time. So if you just want to talk about the competitiveness of Usman versus Covington 1 as being the reason why Colby Covington deserves a second shot at the title, okay. But if we're talking merit and what have you done to really lock in that title challenge spot, it's really not justifiable. I mean, especially since Colby Covington, okay, look at his wins before fighting Usman for the title. His most meaningful wins were against Damian Maia, good win. Colby Covington actually displayed very well his improved boxing in that fight against Maia, but Maia himself isn't a boxer, but Colby Covington looked like gold in that fight. And then he beats Rafael Dos Anjos and Robbie Lawler. And in that Robbie Lawler fight, yeah, he was threatening the takedown and even getting some half takedowns where he's got one wrist on Lawler, kind of driving him into the cage and half controlling him, but also just pasting Lawler up in the boxing. Like, Colby Covington, for a while, he was very underrated. Now I think he gets his due as a boxer or as a stand-up fighter, especially after going toe-to-toe with Usman. But we've now seen several times where Colby Covington performs very well in the boxing. Pretty damn technical. And he showcased that against Lawler, which was his last fight before going against Usman. So if you look at like the quality of his wins leading up to the title, okay, you could justify that first title defense. But again, since that loss to Usman, he's only beaten Tyron Woodley. He hasn't fought, Jorge Masvidal. He hasn't fought and beaten Leon Edwards. He hasn't fought any of the Gilbert Burns. So it's like you're not beating Wonderboy Thompson. He's not beating any of these guys who are also knocking at the door, but somehow again finds himself fighting for the title for the second time. So not really feeling that one, but here we are, Usman versus Colby Covington 2. What do I expect between these guys? Well, some people think that Usman is going to win even more easily than he did in the first fight, because again, that first fight was a total dogfight. Going into the 5th, anybody's guess who's winning, right? Well, when you couple that with Usman has only gotten better and has only shown that he's gotten better, knocking out Jorge Masvidal, which nobody knocks out Jorge Masvidal, stopping Gilbert Burns, beating Masvidal the first time, and obviously beating Covington before that. I mean, Usman's just been on a tear, He's like widely regarded as like the best or second or third best pound for pound fighter in the sport, any division. So many are then concluding Usman should have an easier time with Covington the second time around, because it's almost like he's lapping the field again, whereas again, Covington hasn't shown us a ton since that first fight. But it doesn't always add up that way. Even if it seems like the evidence points to this being the likely scenario, that Usman stops Covington in, say, like the second or third round instead of the 5th this time, it doesn't always cut so cleanly. I think that maybe Covington's inactivity has caused him to be perhaps a little fresher for this rematch. Maybe there's something in Usman that, because I already beat this guy, he's not as motivated to, handle business and isn't as devoted, to just his, day-to-day training that he was before. I mean, he's been champ for a while now, and he's got everybody's respect. So, I mean, what is continuing to fuel Usman's hunger? I don't know, but he still seems pretty hungry to me. But I feel like Colby Covington is going to I'm not going to say perform better, because again, you don't get too much closer than he did in the first fight, but I don't think that he's going to just lay down or be easier pickings in this rematch. I think that, first of all, I don't think that we're going to see the same style of fight between the two in this rematch. I don't think it's just going to be, the sweet science tit for tat boxing / slugfest. I don't think we're going to get that. I think we're actually going to get the mix of wrestling and stand-up that we thought we were going to get in the first fight between them. Now, how that plays out when they start in the stand-up, who's going to go for the takedown first? Is Usman going to be jabbing to Covington's body? Because Covington, a southpaw, is probably going to be connecting pretty cleanly with Usman, as long as the stand-up goes. I don't see Usman, even with his improved stand-up, just dominating Colby Covington in a kickboxing fight right now. Even with all of his recent sensational success, I think that, first of all, I don't think Colby Covington has reason to be as spooked by the threat of a takedown, because I feel like he's better equipped to neutralize or at least keep things close in the grapple between he and Usman, whereas Masvidal, not so much. So Masvidal has good reason to react anytime Usman looks like he's going low, whether it's with a jab to the body or a takedown feint. So I don't think he could spook Covington in the same way. So he would actually have to jab hard to the body to get Covington's respect, to then be able to come upstairs with the right hand. But I think Colby Covington uses a good amount of feints and kind of trickery as well to be able to, go for the takedown. Like when he took Woodley down in the first round of Covington versus Woodley, it was because Woodley threw the right hand and Colby slipped under it, secured the takedown very cleanly. Is there a chance where Usman goes high, Covington goes low, actually takes Usman down? These are different things to consider. And neither of these guys are the type to take you down and finish you on the ground. They take you down and they wear on you. They beat you up, but aren't always going for submissions, aren't going for like an arm bar, then try to arm triangle. They're not going for all of these jiu-jitsu-like holds. So what is the grapple going to look like between the guys? But I actually think that this is going to be a pretty damn competitive fight, at least through the first couple rounds. I think that Usman is going to have more moments in the stand-up to where he's the slight winner of most of the exchanges. But I do think that it's going to be interesting to see who's stronger than who, because we're assuming that Usman's stronger than Covington in the grapple. It's not a safe assumption. I mean, Usman is strong as hell, obviously. But Colby Covington is no slouch. I got the impression watching him versus Woodley that every time Woodley would try to turn Covington around when they were in the stand-up clinch and try to push Covington up against a cage, Covington in short order would be able to turn that around and then press Woodley into the cage. So it's going to be interesting to see these guys lock horns. In this fight, I actually think that Usman is going to edge a decision win. I don't think he's going to stop Covington this time. I think Covington is going to exceed expectations, given how good we believe Usman is at this point and how little Colby Covington has proven since his first go-around with Usman. I think Colby Covington is actually going to surprise us and make this fight super competitive to where it's going to be a close decision win. Maybe something like 3 rounds to 2, 4 rounds to 1, maybe even a split decision. But I do think that Usman is going to either drop Colby Covington at some point with the right hand probably, and then, win rounds by more so controlling Covington than vice versa in the clinch or even on the ground, to where Usman is going to be able to keep this fight from turning into a Colby Covington press you up against the cage and win rounds against you. Because Colby Covington, let's be clear, is one of the best round winners in the sport. You've got some people who will get you out of there, put your lights out, and then you've got guys who will just wear on you and know how to win rounds. Colby Covington knows how to win rounds, so I think he's going to take 1 or more rounds in this fight. I just think that Usman is going to win the majority of the rounds on majority of the judges' scorecards. But yeah, let me know what you think about this one. It's going to be interesting. Again, we have Orthodox versus Southpaw, although they both stance switch a bit. Again, I don't think that we're going to get the same style of fight that we got in the first fight. This is going to be a true mixed martial arts affair, I believe. And I think that we will finally see their wrestling skills tested against one another. We will, once again, see their gas tanks tested against one another. Usman just seems super durable. Like, even when he got hurt against Gilbert Burns, we saw how quickly he recovered. Well, I mean, it wasn't that quickly. Like, he was hurt for a moment, but he made it out of the woods and then quickly took control of that fight in the stand-up. So, yeah, I can't wait to see how this one unfolds. Again, I am taking Kamaru Usman via close but pretty clear decision. But yeah, let me know what you think about this one in the comments. Like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the fight talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.